Kia ora, benvenuti, and welcome to Voices in the Dark. This is a very special episode of our series on sex and relationships.
We are going to talk about open relationships. We did an episode about being open, sort of in a more general sense, not exclusively about open relationships, where we had the wonderful Cassie Blanton as our guest. But I've had quite a lot of people getting in touch with me saying, I wanted more. I wanted more about the specifics. How can you get into an open relationship? I mean, at the heart of it, there's a lot of people who feel drawn to an open relationship, but it's kind of scary and unknown. They don't know how to bring it up with their partner. They're not sure if they would be able to deal with it. And so we want to dive into a lot of that, both from, I guess, the conceptual side, but also the very practical steps about how to even bring it up, how to talk about it, how to deal with your crazy ass emotions that come up.
Yeah, because I mean, even from you're the one person that I know well that is in an open relationship. And even though it is a far healthier open relationship than I've ever witnessed or heard of, it still has emotional issues.
Yeah, I mean, if it didn't, it wouldn't be much of a relationship. There has to be emotional components of all kinds, so you have the spectrum. Before we dive into it, let's invite you to find us at voicesinthedark.world to see the show notes, but also come to our Facebook group. You'll find us at facebook.com/vinthed, and then there's a discussion group you can see that's linked there, because I suspect there will be a part 2 to this discussion, and it would be great to base it off the critiques, the comments, the feedback, the questions, the trolling that people come up with.
Accusation of cuckhood.
Yeah, we are beta male cucks, of course. So come talk to us about that, and thank you, as always, to our Patreon supporters for helping to keep the lights on in our studio. So if you're listening only audio, there's now 3 cameras on us. We're beautifully lit. You're much better dressed than I am, but I didn't pack.
I made an effort today.
I didn't pack for the occasion, but you know, I'm wearing a great t-shirt. It's very tight, so people should come and watch that either on our website or the YouTube channel. So, open relationships, where should we start?
Well, first I think just putting some context into the history, both recent and far away, might help our listeners. I don't know if, for example, if people are aware of some of the work that's been sort of quoted, for example, in Sex at Dawn, or The Third Chimpanzee by Jared Diamond. Sex at Dawn is by Chris Ryan.
And his wife, Casilda Jetta, I think. I forget how to pronounce her second name, but I think it might be Jetta.
Okay. About the original state of human sexuality, if you want. This idea, this theory that perhaps the norms and behaviors we are currently putting into action or holding as the norm weren't actually what we evolved to do. The constraints that we evolved for, according to some of these anthropologists and studying
scholars,
it's too hot, was that it was a much more fluid situation with people having multiple partners, not there being such possessiveness, because before agriculture, the necessity of a medium-sized sort of nomadic tribe would be to sort of be nice and civil to each other and not have any kind of strict possessing categories.
Because there wasn't land and possessions to hand on in any case. So when you start owning land in an agricultural setting, you want heirs and you have possessions, and then you pass those on, and what you have is at the cost of what other people have, and so they're going to want it. Whereas if you're living in a smaller system in a state of essentially abundance, look, there's berries everywhere, there's enough animals for everyone, there isn't the same sense of possessiveness and lineage tied up in all of this stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I'm wary of is when people use that as a super strong argument for, therefore we need to revert back to that because that's what we've evolved to do. We're not evolved to be monogamous, which I think is disingenuous, because it's the same argument people do for gluten. They say, we haven't evolved to eat grains. I'm like, maybe you haven't, motherfucker. My people, the Mediterranean people, have been eating grain for 60,000 years. I think we've got it covered. Like, that is way shorter amount of time necessary than to make the adjustment necessary to have that kind of a diet, which is exemplified, for example, by milk. milk is not generally digestible by Asian people, whereas European, especially Northern Europeans, which drank milk for several thousands of years, are perfectly adapted to it. They're fine.
Overall.
Yeah. So simply going, oh, that's what we were used to do when we were cavemen, doesn't necessarily lead to, oh, and it must mean that it's the right way to be.
Sure, and I think in defense of Chris Ryan in particular, even if his personal view might be different, I think he has maybe stronger personal view. The book and argument that he makes is not that therefore everyone should live as we used to, so much as at least in talking about sex and the idea of monogamy, is to not believe the conventional narrative that we've internalized for the longest time, which is monogamy is the default and natural and therefore kind of implicitly best state. Yeah. So they don't, in the book, he and Casilda don't argue that you should now do something different with your life, but more be aware that the standard narrative that we've grown up with is not just fact. So don't feel like you're a freak or unnatural because maybe you have other desires and you don't want to be sexually monogamous with just one person for your whole life. End of story. Boom.
Boom.
So that's the background. That's a whole other episode, really, to get into the context.
That's the ancient background. I guess the more modern background has been post-agriculture, and especially with a few particular moments in history when things became more puritanical and more restrictive. The advent of Catholicism and then Protestantism and then subsequently Victorianism as well have led us to have a romanticized and very idealized sort of idea of what love needs to be true love, to be considered okay, and to be a relationship worth having, which has been reinforced, I believe, by the pervasiveness of entertainment and media in today's age. So back in the day, you maybe read one novel about Prince Charming, and you thought, oh, that's kind of nice. But these days, magazines, movies, books, like TV series, they're all bombarding you with idealized versions of what you're supposed to have, which we internalize as this is the right way to have love. This is the right way to be married.
It's perfect or it's not worth doing.
Right.
It's kind of an underlying message, which, I mean, you're setting yourself up for a terrible fall in the process. And an open relationship is definitely not going to be perfect, and like any relationship. So I think what one of the initial misperceptions about an open relationship is, oh, it's going to be like super cool and easy. Like, no, it's more complicated, I would say, and at the same time, it's not that it's not more complicated in an entirely different way to two people relationships. It's more that many of the underlying tensions, insecurities, and so on that exist in all those normal relationships are really brought to the surface because it's so much harder to sweep them under the rug when you're being confronted with your perhaps most fundamental insecurities on a daily basis.
So that's interesting. I guess it's a sort of advanced course. It's the Spartan race versus the triathlon of relationships.
It is. So it's not something to be entered into with a mentality. I don't know who people would enter it with this mentality, but you are going to be confronted with your deepest insecurities. But that can be incredibly rewarding for your personal development, your understanding of why you feel that you want this or you don't want that, understanding whether or not you really value yourself and how you can try and do that better, and discover what are you looking for in a relationship. Are you looking for validation? Are you looking for something you feel is missing in your life? Because being in an open relationship where you feel there's fundamentally something missing, it's not going to be solved at a deep level by going and having lots of random sex. Like, I guess the kind of open relationship that I'm in and think is a healthy model is one where you're already in a great situation and then you're bringing other elements in and growing and changing as part of that. If that makes sense. It's like this vast thing to try and get into.
Now, Sorry, go on.
Well, I wanted to start with the, I guess, one of the biggest issues that people immediately think of, which is jealousy. So I think I've heard so many people say to me, like, yeah, I mean, I'd love to have an open relationship. I'd like to shag around, but I don't think I could handle it if I think of my partner with somebody else. I couldn't deal with that. So that's, at its heart, insecurity, of course, because what tends to come up is, oh no, they're getting pleasure from someone else, so maybe they won't want it from me anymore, or maybe it's going to be better than I am, and I don't know what's going on, so my mind is going wild with the possible fantasies of it. Because what tends to happen is, unless you communicate about it and feel part of the situation of your partner's extra sexual activities, the mind kind of just automatically starts conjuring like the most incredibly intense erotic situation. And you're just like, I don't know. But a thing that really helped me think about this, to be able to not just reject that feeling of like, oh, they're with someone else right now, was something that the amazing relationship counselor Esther Perel said, which is that jealousy is not the same as possessiveness. And she thinks jealousy is a good thing. She calls jealousy an erotic rage. I love that, an erotic rage. I
have an erotic rage.
Wherein you see your partner's sexual energy being directed somewhere else, and you're like, oh, I want that directed at me. And you can use that to like inspire and reactivate you and be like, oh, well, I'm going to make more effort now. I'm going to bring my best self to the table. I feel like I want to step up right now and not take this person or this relationship for granted. And it's not the possessiveness piece, which is I lock you in a cage because I'm so scared if you leave it, then you're never going to come back. So feeling jealous isn't necessarily bad. And if you can interpret it as, okay, this shows how much I fucking care. Like, just even, it's not so dissimilar from like going away from your partner for a time and you miss them and you come back and you feel kind of energized because you realized, this matters a lot to me. There's a sort of contrast piece that brings that out more clearly. And she's added to that, she's got this nice turn of phrase that I like to come back to, which is, if you love someone, let them go. If they love you, they'll come back.
It's I've heard
he
that
doesn't
before.
like it.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily true. I mean, it's nice when it is, but also you gotta remember that other human beings are flawed. It only works if the other human being is also perfect. They might love you, but then fail at their own insecurity or something else.
Okay, so it's a more complex piece than that, but I guess the underlying point is lock them in a cage and they're gonna come and resent you anyway.
Right. But maybe there's a balance between the two things. I don't know, because you can't force someone to be yours, which is what a lot of people use monogamy for, as opposed to it being more of a joint decision to externalize their desire to give themselves to the other person. That's what I hold the ideal monogamy as. It's more of a I'm yours rather than you're mine.
Okay.
But at the same time, being so free with the other person's, you'll come back to me if you love me. It can come across in a way that makes the other person feel like you don't care.
It can. So it has to be handled carefully. So the attitude, I think, is not, I don't care what you do. It's more like, okay, if you want to do something, then I support you. I mean, it's not so dissimilar to, say, your partner wants to go off on a trip by themselves, or if they want to pursue some sort of career that maybe puts geographical distance between you. It hurts, but what kind of a loving and supportive partner are you if you just say, no, you can't do that because I will feel bad? That's the kind of the letting go piece, at least as I understand it. Because it's not like, let go, I don't care. It's, I guess, back to Phil McKernan, it's like the palm upwards, open. It's like, okay, be who you're going to be. I can think of a few things more distressing than the thought of someone staying with me because they felt they had to. Like out of a sense of, I can't do any better, or you know, that this will do, that kind of makes me feel sick.
Yeah.
So how does one set out to get in an open relationship?
Well, I think the best way to talk about that might be to use an example.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't always have this belief, did you? You didn't start out as sort of open relationships are my thing.
No.
Okay. So what was John like before that, in terms of his views on monogamy and
A serial relationship?
Yeah.
After, I guess, when I finally got laid at all, was rapidly into relationships. And
so you were a lesbian?
I was a lesbian.
Are you holding a lesbian?
What I found myself doing, like, it's hard to see it at the time, but looking back, is that I would be in a relationship and I would be frustrated because there were other experiences I wanted, especially if you've had very little like sexual experience anyway, and you're like, oh my god, this is it. You know, I've slept with 2 people in my life. Is this it? Then I would get to a point in the relationship where I was just so frustrated and dissatisfied that I would leave. But I would leave when someone else had turned up in my life, and I was like, hey, I'm really excited by this possibility. So I would sort of jump one to the, you know, which was not healthy for myself, because I ended up having done that in a situation where I was like, I wasn't okay just being me by myself. I was in that mindset of I need somebody else to complete something in me which is missing.
Bouncing from cock to cock.
Bouncing from cock to
You
cock.
slag.
Yes.
No judgment on this
No
show.
judgment.
None whatsoever.
And then I met and pursued, at a state of briefly being single, met and pursued a guy who was at the same university as me, and was just like, yes, you're awesome, amazing. And he was kind of playing the hard to get bit, because he was kind of interested in someone else, not in like a big significant way, but he confronted me directly with, okay, I'm into this, but I don't want this to be exclusive. I want to be able to sleep with other people. And I was kind of like, huh? You what? And so, kind of in a state of I didn't know what to think, I basically said, well, okay, because I didn't feel like I had any say. It wasn't like we'd been together for years and I'd be like, no, you can't do that. And I kind of digested that a bit, was pretty uncomfortable for some time. And then it's like, okay, well, if he's doing that, this is not the best way to do it. I was like, I'm going to sleep with some other guys. I think the best way to do that sort of thing is not ever in the frame of, I'm going to get you back, or do it first,
right,
or I'll show you. Because then the motivation isn't fun and about, it doesn't have the relationship at the center. It's then driven by a sort of act of insecurity or even aggression against the other person.
It's remarkable the difference in behavior when you switch identifying someone from being a teammate to being a competitor.
Yeah.
It reverberates throughout other aspects of things.
That's definitely a thing I want to, I guess, keep coming back to, that I think a great way to think about an open relationship is we're teammates. And we are a thing in ourselves and we support each other. We're on this team us. And we do our own things, but ultimately that's the core. Because I think that's a really positive substitution for I'm yours and you're mine, in that kind of, like, it's partly a language problem. It sounds very possessive.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like teammate, maybe it doesn't sound as romantic, but I think it can be. I think team us feels pretty romantic to me at this point.
I think it's one of the most romantic ideals to hold. The idea that the reason you're together is because you've recognized something in each other and you've formed something that's greater than, like, the sum is greater than the parts. And there is such a thing as the both of you.
Yeah.
And it's its own thing, and that's special. Without it being that the people have actually merged. No, them coming together has created something new, which is an emergent property, which has new aspects that didn't exist without it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a baby, except you can kill it without legal repercussions. back to me. So I did sleep with some other guys and didn't really tell them about it at that.
Oh.
I did later, but we hadn't set any rules, and that's something we should talk about, whether we call them rules or like the agreement or something.
Commandments.
Yeah, the commandments. And then I remember that's kind of like a small epiphany, just walking down the street, and I was like, well, I had these experiences, and they were fun, and they weren't meaningless to me. Like, I liked these guys, and it was great. But I don't feel any differently about, I don't know if we were using the word boyfriend at the time, but let's use it, about my boyfriend. I don't feel like sleeping with these other guys, even though it wasn't just anonymous random sex. I didn't feel it impinging on the way I felt about me and my boyfriend. And I thought, I should probably give him the same benefit of the doubt and recognize that if I can have this experience, and I think many people, like I said, they do believe I could go and shag someone and it wouldn't affect how I feel about my partner, then you need to reciprocate in turn, and that's where the trust comes in. Believe the best of the other person, and even if it goes horribly wrong, if something bad happens, at least it wasn't your overriding distrust and insecurity which pushed it in that direction.
So how did this progress once you were more open and he was more open back? Did it evolve in any particular way? Did you establish rules or things like anything like that? Well, actually, let's start with that. I have more questions.
So many questions. It was kind of funny because we had a time limit on the relationship, or so we thought, because it was going to be 6 months, and I was off to do research in Russia, and he was off to do like year abroad language studies in France. And so we're like, okay, let's not get too attached. We did. And then we said, okay, we're not a thing. We're in these different countries, but we were very much in touch and emotionally involved and visited each other when we could. And when we were in the same place, we were together. And in that period, I said, I don't want to really know about who you might be banging or what's going on. I don't think I want to know. And then by the time that we came back to the UK, like, we knew there had been additional banging going on. And I realized, okay, I don't quite know what I was so worried about. Like, it's okay, I didn't know then if I wanted to know any details, but I kind of, okay, I'm sure these things happened, and we talked a bit about it, and we kind of had the first proper kind of, I don't know what to call it, sort of sit-down conversation about it, going, okay, so we're both back here, and we're both kind of at the same moment going, I think I want this to be an open relationship. Because it had never really been defined before. It was sort of, okay, there's someone I want to look at, whatever. And at that point, it became a process of discovery. And discovery through communication, like, oh, I don't think I want to know. Oh, actually, I do want to know. And what I discovered was that when I did know about the extracurricular activities, they worried me less. Because I knew what it was. It wasn't just something in my imagination. And it evolved, I think we're together in one way or another for about 4 years. And it evolved into a situation where it was sort of more polyamorous than just open. That primary partners, him and me, and then other people that we saw in a like secondary kind of way, where it was more like, more than just like friend with benefits, but something more than just this is someone I occasionally shag, but like, hey, this is someone I like and we share some things together. Yeah. And those people all knew, like, from the outset what the situation was. Like, yeah, I'm not going to be your boyfriend, but I guess it helps in it to be in a university context where everyone's kind of very busy with what they're doing anyway and experimenting a little bit, and it's fun, and everyone's probably going to be leaving town in a few years anyway, so none of it was like, this is a big commitment. And that was really nice. What I realized was, and something that I'm seeing ever more now in my current relationship, is that experiences with other people can allow you to learn new things about yourself and new ways of communicating, new ways of thinking, like any connection with new people, and you bring them back to your main relationship and it enriches it. You know, and that can go from like how you think about something, or just like, hey, I learned this new sex move. Want me to show you? Which is pretty cool.
Cool. Did it ever bring problems, the openness, in that particular relationship?
Occasionally. There's, and I think that I'd draw, well, I think I'd rather bring up an example from my current relationship, because it's sort of the same dynamic, where it's really important to keep open and conscious of where the other person is at. Meaning that if they're having a really hard time and are really stressed about something, going and having your random shag and so on is probably not the best thing to do at that moment.
Yeah.
Or at least check, because maybe it's fine. But I think showing that you're aware of where the other person is at is often all that's required. Like, I know you're not feeling great right now. I was going to go see this person, but you're my priority. And, you know, if you would rather that I was here and we were just hanging out, that can change the feeling of like insecurity in a second to, oh no, go and do your thing. Like, it's really sweet that you thought of me first, but go and do your thing. And there was an occasion with my current boyfriend where he'd been hanging out with a guy that it was clearly more than just, hey, let's meet and have sex. Like, they like each other, making friends. And I'm like, okay, this is good, but I can feel my insecurity rising, because this is a different level of intimacy. Because they have like a nice connection. I'm like, cool, this is good. However, I can feel the emotion coming up in me, the insecurity. So it would be nice if I could be kept more in the loop than usual on this. Not just, hey, yeah, I'm going to hang out, but just, you know, could you let me know what's going on? Not like text me every 10 minutes what's happening, but just, you know, a little bit of the contact, hey, it's happening, blah, blah, blah. And on one particular occasion, he did not do that. And it was, you know, on paper, it wouldn't count, I think, as such a big deal. It's like, okay, so you didn't text me from like 8 p.m. until it was like midnight. Not such a huge deal. But it felt like quite a huge deal, because I'd explicitly said, I've got some insecurity going on, please could you keep me in the loop? I didn't know if the dude had come round even. I didn't know what was going on, so of course my mind is just going, oh my god, they're having the most incredible sex. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't, you know, it's hard not to interpret. Like, I did believe the best, he just forgot to text. But that doesn't matter. You know, like, he should have done, because that's the kind of agreement that we have. A sort of, hey, the guy's coming around just now, talk to you later, love you. Just a simple thing. To feel, essentially, I just felt ignored. And that can be extremely hurtful when it's at this level of sort of intimacy and connections with other people.
I think just in general, a lot of the time, building resentment comes from not being aware of each other's feelings. Not even doing anything about it necessarily, but I find relationships that are rocky, you can always see that each person is not even realizing they're doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
And that's even more of the problem than anything wrong that they do. Mm-hmm. Just the idea that they don't stop and go, how does the other person feel about what I'm up to? Because what a person's looking for is that level of connection where you don't just think in your own mind, you also externalize and look at their consciousness and feelings and see it from their point of view, because that's the bond that you have. So you're negating the bond by being an ass, which is worse than the ass hattery itself.
Worse than the, I love that. You can go too far the other way, like, and sometimes I do, it's not exactly a big problem, but over worrying about what the other person is feeling, instead of just being, I'm cool, I'm fine.
That's another form of not connecting, though, because thinking about what the other person's feeling and understanding it correctly is what the other person's looking for, not for you to constantly check in, which is another form of you don't get me.
It's incredibly frustrating when you feel that and someone's still, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, I'm fucking okay.
I was okay.
And
now I'm not. Fuck you.
So the outcome of that situation was, well, it was emotional and difficult, but the point of reconnection that was crucial was not him telling me, oh, well, it wasn't even that exciting, or, oh, I just, the time just got away with me. I had to keep sort of bringing it back to, stop talking about him. I'm talking about us. I just want to hear you say that you understand where I was and how I felt. And that was it. And it's a strange thing, but just hearing him put himself in my shoes and recognizing where I was at, like, tension gone. Now we can talk more normally again. It wasn't because I wanted some guilt trip. It didn't make any difference to me to know, oh, the sex wasn't good or the sex was amazing. I mean, maybe if it was really amazing, that would have annoyed me a little bit in that context. But, it was just about, and I think most of such issues like this are really about the two people, if it's two, in the middle. It's not about the other people.
I don't think it's strange at all, though, because I think ultimately it's a form of psychological grooming, which doesn't sound nice when I say it. Not like pedophile grooming a kid. I'm talking about the equivalent of picking ticks out of another monkey. It's time devoted to reinforcing a bond. This is on a psychological level, as opposed to how a gentle touch is a physical form of that.
Speaking of touch, I think a fundamental problem that we have in our Western societies, or in many of them anyway, is we have a problem with touch. We think that touch is sexual. That I think this is less so like from your neck of the woods. I love hanging out with Italians where they're just like putting their arms around me and it feels very natural and nice, because it's happening from a natural, this is our culture kind of way. But in America and in Britain and I guess probably more northern European countries, there's this odd standoffishness in the sense like, no, it's inappropriate because touch equals sex. And so we have this like loaded sense that physical contact with other people or showing love for other people, which isn't also sex, or it's like it's been bundled all together. It's like love and sex bundled, touch also bundled into that stuff. And I think we've got so many hang-ups over this different kinds of pleasure, as though as soon as you dip your toe in the water, you have to go all the way in, or you're terrible.
Well, I have to say, I kind of almost accidentally enjoy the Northern Europeans' prudishness. Because even though it isn't sexual, the fact that they hold it to be and therefore don't touch me as much as Italians do is wonderful for me.
As an autiste.
Less familiarity. Because I think for me the problem is probably that it isn't sexual. A sexual touch feels more like, okay, this is sexual, let me give or withdraw consent. Whereas it's really hard to have to endure non-sexual touch, because otherwise people are like, what's wrong? It's not sexual. Why don't you want this? Kind of. It's weird.
Well, it's related, right? That's just what you don't enjoy rather than a pathology of the culture.
Right.
Just so I won't touch you.
Well, no, it depends, and it also obviously like I'm not the same now as I was when I was a kid, but there's still this familiarity without having given permission sometimes. We were talking about it yesterday when we were eating at the restaurant, and I was asked why I don't speak Italian to the Italian waiters at an Italian restaurant. And my reason was because otherwise they're too friendly.
Do you like to expand on that?
I don't like this assumption that I'm like you and we understand each other purely because we come from the same place. Because for me, it's almost never true at all. And I prefer to be treated like everybody else is treated.
Mm-hmm.
So like, they'd be kind of distant and cold to British people. Therefore, I want that. I don't want to suddenly go, hey, you know, and every time I see that, you know, they you know, hug me and, you know, like, or even give me free stuff. Like, no, like...
I've kind of felt some of that where I don't like going to the same coffee shop too regularly because partly it can be nice if the staff are like, oh, hey, it's you. But what if I want to work? And what if I actually want my coffee served on time rather than, like, you forget about it because, it's just John. You know, he's always here. Like, get 10 other coffees ready first for everybody else. And I'm like, where's my fucking coffee? It's like familiarity breeding contempt of some kind, or at least bad service.
Well, ultimately, for me, even pleasant social interactions are work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only so much work you can do in a day. So I wouldn't, you know, do a whole lot of work and then want to hang out with strangers and then also spend some time, you know, looking after the needs of my family. Or like, to me, it's all work. It all takes away. It's only alone time that recharges me, or maybe time with a few select people that I can be comfortable being alone with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just purely energetic. Like, I don't want to take out of the bank account too much.
Well, let's talk about the energy needed for open relationships, because it can take a lot of talking, but there's a recharge aspect that I don't know if people who haven't been in those situations really know about. So there's quite a few positive surprises I've found. Like, by the time I ended up in this current relationship, I hadn't been in an open relationship for a bunch of years. And so I went in with this sort of, I know what this is like. No, because every relationship is different. And so, of course, certain things may be similar throughout. You're still you. There's still things you do and don't like. But it's a different combination each time. And I was kind of surprised to discover that the thing... I'll come back to the energy thing in a second, but one of the biggest surprises for me was that I was and am kind of more turned on by Jamie going off and getting some action than I am by myself going and doing it. I'm like, wow, look at my man go. Look how desired he is. Look at that sexual energy. Erotic rage. I want to up my game. I want to be as cool and exciting and sexy as him, and be able to kind of rejoice or celebrate him doing these things that are positive experiences for him. Not so dissimilar to like, oh, you went and took this cool course, or you won a competition, or you just did something creative that's really cool. It's in a more kind of exciting, sexy way, not so dissimilar. What was harder for me, which surprised me, was that me going off on my first like couple of playing away experiences was much more difficult for me than him doing it. I just was like, oh God, is this going to be a problem for him? Am I doing this for the sake of doing it? Because I think I want to do it, but I don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it, so that I've got, you know, tick on my side as well, has played away. But that just became like this whirling storm of noise that was just me trying to create problems, trying to keep control of a situation by going, okay, well, I don't know what his reaction will be, because he doesn't even know what his reaction will be, so I'm not going to do it. And someone said to me that you're screwing it up before you even begin, because if you think this is something important to you, to have an open relationship, and then you say, oh, it's okay, you know, I don't feel like it right now, I don't need to do that. You're self-amputating. You're preemptively cutting off parts of your personality, or parts of your desires and things that you want to do in your life, experiences that you want to have, out of a fear of rejection from somebody else. And that, I think, only ever leads to resentment, because it's not even as if the other person said you couldn't do it.
No.
It's that you
It's all
didn't.
in your head.
Yeah, you didn't because you thought it might hurt them. But that, I think, inevitably gets short-circuited into it's your fault, you know, because I was scared of what you might feel, etc.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge for me, and one that I still comes up for me. I'm just like, because each time is going to be somewhat of a new experience. But a positive surprise, another positive surprise was in like threesome scenarios, seeing Jamie like in front of me getting it on with another guy. I'm like, fuck, this is so hot. I just go and sit back and watch this, and then dive back in. This is amazing. This is exciting. Which I think a lot of people would. I've heard lots of men, I guess, say that they would feel probably physically sick at the thought of that. Well,
in their heads, I think, but like there is a funny effect in terms of we are wired to be turned on by other people having sex in general.
mm-hmm.
You know, because we did evolve from socially, sort of sexually gregarious creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and it was probably a good idea if your mate was shagging the lady in heat to also try to put your seed in her. You know, it was probably the right time of the month to, you know, she's ovulating, you gotta get it in. So, and then there's this aspect, we're social animals in general, so there is this bit. In males in particular, there's a funny bit where if there's sexual things happening, they progressively get less disgusted towards things. Your disgust response in men
Mm-hmm.
is turned down, dialed way down during sexual situations. So if you show a man some porn and then show him disgusting things, the disgustometer inside the brain doesn't register very high.
Interesting.
After they come, back right down. This effect is not present in women's brain, apparently.
Ah.
So, you know, if they're having sex and you do something they consider disgusting, it's just as disgusting as if they weren't having sex. Whereas if you're having sex and the girl, I don't know, like farts or like does something that you don't find appealing, that you wouldn't find appealing normally,
Mm-hmm.
during that moment you're like, this is hot anyway. So I think there's like all sorts of weird layers of sexual human behavior going on, which even someone that thinks, oh, like I couldn't handle that, I think a lot more people than
Mm-hmm.
a lot more people could than they probably think.
Huh.
Certainly men.
Yeah, men especially. So I tried to structure how we could talk about this, but I feel like I'm in the
Sorry.
middle. I'm just in the middle of the soup, and so it's difficult to.
I had something I wanted to touch on because you mentioned it as well. And I was waiting for it to come up naturally, but the question was around. You said that it's important to you to have this aspect in your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning it just before.
Mm.
And I'm curious how you go from, like, this is something I even haven't considered, to this is an important part of my life. I'm curious to the transition between those two states. And at what point did you think, no, this is something that is an integral part of who I am, and living without it would be amputation, self-amputation?
Well, you can willingly amputate some things, of course, but I think it's, you know, I don't know if this is a great parallel, but you don't know you love skiing unless you try skiing. If someone like puts you on a slope and you're like, oh, hey, this is really cool. Okay. I'd be really sad if I couldn't ski anymore.
Yeah.
And it's not that. So I had the first open relationship. The next one, that wasn't on the table. The other person was just understood conceptually that it was cool, but said, no, I'm not going to be able to deal with it. And I thought, I'm so into you. Okay, I'm not going to assume it's an essential part of my life to have an open relationship. Like I've sown my wild oats, whatever. I don't have to do this. And I wouldn't say that it was that was the cause of the downfall of the relationship at all. But I thought in the many months, years of reflection after that relationship, no, wait, I do want to have these other experiences, because I feel like it's a strange thing to deny yourself potentially exciting and positive experiences and connections with other people, and right down to the simple fact that you see someone hot and they're into you, you're like, fuck, this would be great, let's do it. I don't see why that shouldn't be just part of my normal existence. So I haven't got it like blocked out very clearly as like this is an absolute non-negotiable, because it's more got to the point where I'm like, well, why would that be a problem? And so if I were to hypothetically meet somebody and I was single and they were absolutely dead against it, I think I probably have more issue with why are you dead against it, rather than, oh, I have this overwhelming need, because it tells me something about them, security-wise, self-perception-wise, probably nature of possessiveness-wise, that they couldn't deal with it. Rather than, say, with Jamie, I had brought it up quite early, and part of our initial discussion was under the influence of MDMA, so we could speak very freely. And I was sort of surprised at myself, because he said, would you, like, so would this be open? I'm like, yes, because that's just what I want. And he was kind of less certain, but sort of thought, okay, I don't really know what that means, but I think, you know, he was curious about it and felt like it would be interesting to him to try. And it turns out it suits him very well. And I think it may suit a lot of people very well, because it's just not been an option on the table before. And because he came to it with this sense of the curiosity, then okay, it could have ended up in different directions that wouldn't have worked out so well. But I think if you find yourself confronted with someone saying absolutely no under any circumstances, they have some problems. Like shutting the door and going, no communication is a sign of some unresolved issues, which at least it will be good to try and understand and talk about, regardless of whether you end up in an open relationship. Because they're not in a secure enough place with themselves and with you, and there are things that have been left unsaid. So I was surprised in that MDMA experience where just a simple question came up, and Jamie was like, oh, but would it be like people, even if we're in the same city, rather than if I was traveling? And I said, yeah, of course. And I was like, oh, I seem to feel more strongly about this than I thought. Which I guess leads in quite nicely to like setting the ground rules. And I would say that what he and I have are not rules, they're agreements for how we want to do things. And those are fluid, because we've discovered through the process, like, I guess more sort of restrictive perhaps agreements beforehand, like, okay, probably not in the same city when I'm visiting, or probably like, okay, not in our bedroom, like at our space. And then over time, just situations have unfolded where it's been like, oh, so it would have to be in our bedroom. You know what? I don't think I mind. Where it's that discovery. It's like, first of all, I think it's good to make the agreements of like, okay, so not in this place, or not my friends or something, but being open to realize as time goes by, you know what, I thought I was worried about that, but I'm not. Like seeing the same person more than once. Okay. Like, I'm not sure about that one, because that's more intimate and so on. And then the opportunity comes up, and I found, I'm not saying this would be the case for everybody, but it's like every time I come to one of these things, it's like pushing at an open door, because we just kind of look at each other and go, yeah, I think I'm fine. I don't know why I was worried about that, because you've gone on the journey together. Yeah. You've decided to try and protect each other and yourself. And then you go, you know, okay, I probably don't need to wear this chest plate of armor, because I feel okay right now. So it's a constant sort of discovery and renegotiation process.
Yours is quite a young relationship, coming up to a year.
Mm-hmm.
So you hadn't established sort of a internal, I want to say, spiritual certainty.
Mm-hmm.
It was more tentative, like, do you like me? Oh, okay, I like you too. Like, oh, is this long term? Oh yeah, for me too. Like, it's kind of, at the beginning, it's very tentative. And you were doing something which is difficult anyway, at quite an early time. And so I think the more as you go forward, the more the relationship grows and strengthens, and you know that you're in it for the long haul, and so things become less...
That's true.
...fearful and dangerous. At the same time, I'm wondering if, even though it might be super challenging and difficult to do it at the beginning, in a way it shortcuts...
I think it might be.
The speed of the intimacy?
You're already... Well, the speed of the intimacy, perhaps, because you're going through experiences together. Like if you meet and go on some kind of dramatic Indiana Jones adventure together, you're going to feel closer. But it's also, maybe it is a benefit, like, to have it there at the beginning if it's something that is important to one or both of you, because then the learning process of just getting to know each other and how we work as a couple includes this open aspect. So how can people who are already in a monogamous relationship a bunch of years in bring this change? I think maybe it is useful to think of it as going back to when you were beginning your relationship and working out what works and what doesn't for each of you. Because it's not like, okay, take this perfect thing and let's just break it into pieces and start again. It's like, well, it's not perfect already, because nothing is. But what about if we think of this as a new adventure that we're setting off on together and getting to sort of, in a way, it's quite exciting. Like, it's almost like meeting each other again because there's a new part in each of your lives.
I think it's quite a useful sort of concept to have in more areas of life, that there are levels. So there are a lot of things that we think that once we get to this, that's it. Like that's what that is. Like a relationship, in this case a relationship. Okay, I'm in a relationship, it's a relationship, it's gonna be like this forever. It's steady but also stagnant mentally. You don't think of it as something that evolves, or at least young people don't.
But it has to.
It has to, and I think, so I personally feel that I'm, for example, on puberty level 4. There's like, if you think of maturity as something that continues and there's levels to it, the same way with a relationship. If you have it more like a video game, where you're reaching levels together, and then you have to treat each new stage as its own thing, and it's a new thing, and not take things for granted, and always have that sort of learning spirit, that sort of youthful sort of energy in it. I think it will go a long way, regardless of whether you're in an open relationship or not.
Something that I heard Chris Ryan say that really struck me is that, so he's been with his wife for multiple decades, I don't remember how long, but he would say he'd been in like a bunch of different relationships with her, one after the other, and that a long-term relationship is really not one relationship, but it's sequential different relationships with the same person. You'll reach a point where something's changed. Maybe it's a job or a situation, or maybe there's like a blow-up moment and all the stuff comes out that each of you are unhappy about or that you want changed, and then you work on it together and it's a new thing. It's like the perpetual renewal and inevitable like decline of some aspects, but maybe they're the shitty aspects that you want to decline. So if you're in a relationship, a monogamous one, you want to start this open thing, this is another possible phase of that relationship. So how to bring it up? Well, give your partner sex at dawn. That seems to be a popular method among some people.
People actually do that? That's funny.
Yeah, they do. But also...
Isn't the gateway drug of open relationship threesomes?
Well, I think that can be a good step. That, like, kind of like what I said before. If you begin to even talk about these things, like, I think a threesome would be really hot. Is that something you would be interested in? And if the answer is absolutely no, there's problems. And that's a conversation that could go in I don't know how many different directions. But if there's that much, there's something to talk about, and it's not about whether or not you get a threesome. It's about what is going on for that person at that level of security.
An advice I'd like to give our listeners, or anyone really, is whenever you as a person have such a strong emotional response, that's time to sit down and think stuff out, or go to a psychiatrist. Like, and teach this to your children. Teach them that when you have a visceral reaction, what you should do is be introspective or seek someone to talk about it with. And there should be curiosity, not fear around it, more of a, I really had, oh my God, I hate this, it scares me, and I'm getting angry because someone said this. Why? What has caused this in me? Because virtually nothing in life should do that. We're talking about Stoicism and Zen and Buddhism, and all they are is techniques to try and figure out
why that shit comes up.
Yeah.
I remember, so I've hopefully got to a good place where if that comes up for me, I'm like, why? And I can talk openly with Jamie about that. So there was this kind of weird case where he was talking to me about experiences he'd had like well before we'd met in gay saunas, like having what to me sounded like incredibly exciting hot experiences. And I felt insecure and I felt troubled by it. And I was like, why? And the best I could sort of work out was because he sounded so much more cool and liberated and exciting and expressive of his sexuality than I did. And I wanted to be like that and felt intimidated by seeing that. And I didn't feel worthy. And I'm not as cool as you. I'm not as exciting as you.
Not feeling good enough.
Exactly. So I identify that, and now at least it still comes up, but it's more that I'm like, okay, so let's integrate this, and if it is something that I want to be and do, let's allow myself to do it. So it was quite a big step for me. I talked about it briefly on another episode. We went to a sauna together, and I went, oh my God, the maelstrom of emotions. It was super exciting, but also immediate and repeated confrontations with those insecurities. He comes back and tells me of these adventures he's had, and I'm like, fuck, I suck. I'm so boring. Why am I not letting myself go? Why do I never let myself go? Why am I being so strict? Why can't I just allow myself to be abandoned to the bacchanalian experience? But it was, so that wasn't easy for me, but I kind of pulled myself together a bit and was like, okay, I'll see you in a bit. I'm just going to go off back into the sex maze. And that's like an intensified, exaggerated version of, I think, just the everyday versions of these things. Like, okay, you're doing stuff that's cool and exciting, whether it's sexual or otherwise. I'm feeling insecure because I don't feel cool and exciting, and maybe I don't feel worthy of you or this relationship, or I'm frustrated with myself because I've always wanted to do X, Y, Z, but I'm scared. So let's turn it into the erotic rage and go and do it. Go and do it instead of just sitting there beating myself up. Just go, okay, you want to feel these things? Well, maybe you find out like you wanted to go do the crazy thing, be it, get nailed by 10 dicks in a sauna, or you wanted to go parachuting or something. You do it and you're like, you know what, actually I don't think that is for me. I had an idea of what I thought it was, but it's not. But then at least you know.
Yeah.
We use protection, people. The parachute and, for the 10 dicks in the sauna. But we also wanted to talk about language. And in part, I think that comes up with the broaching things in the first place. I guess, first off, I think threesomes probably are a useful way in, when you can be confronted directly with your partner sharing pleasure with somebody else and going, oh, okay. First, that's how Jamie and I began too, and afterwards we were kind of looking at each other like, that felt great. I feel nothing but closer to you. And that's one of the big, beautiful discoveries of this open situation, is that you go and you have an experience, and you're like, that was fun on its own terms. It's nothing like what I've got with my boyfriend. That's the deep, emotional, I want to be sharing my experience of life with you, compared to I want to share a moment with this other person. I come back, and first of all, reclamation sex is amazing. And it's also quite fun, I find anyway, to kind of play out the, like, I guess play out, or in a fantasy way, play through some of the neurosis. Just like, you dirty little whore, I know what you were doing, I know what you were doing. You're like, yeah, I'm a whore, it's so bad. And it's funny, but it's hot too, because that is a real sort of neurosis or fear, a sort of thing. But like any sexual fantasy, it can be played out within like the safe bounds of this is the fantasy role play scenario. And afterwards, it's like, that was so great. I love you so much. Like, it's amazing you go and do these things. That's so cool. But it's also cool to sort of exorcise or harness the erotic rage, the term for the episode, and play that out a little bit. I mean, if you're genuinely like upset and worried, it's I don't think channel that directly. It's like, you dirty whore. If it's coming from that place, but if it's sort of like exciting instead, that can be kind of cool. So how to bring it up? Well, bring it up as a point of discussion, or say, yeah, listen to this podcast, it was interesting. I don't know how you'd feel about it, but because I think a lot of people will be surprised by what their partners have to say. Because if it's something that you haven't spoken about, maybe it's something they haven't spoken about, but also have some thoughts on.
Happens quite a bit. Yeah, with other sexual stuff, people tend to be more tentative about their desires in fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Over even like pretty common stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, just like, would you like I'd quite like to do anal. That kind of thing.
Most girls feel very shy about externalizing that they like some physical rough stuff, because they're worried about the implications, what it means, if they want it, not knowing that, like a lot of women like it.
A lot of men do too. I think maybe it's even harder for a guy to be like to his girlfriend, I'd really like it if you kind of slap me whilst we're in the bedroom.
For sure, actually, yeah, you're right.
And and some people then have trouble drawing a line between like what I just said. That's in the sex fantasy scenario that's playing out. That doesn't mean you then treat the person like, you don't then hit them randomly or treat them as lesser because you played that out. Like, being submissive in the bedroom doesn't mean you're submissive in your life.
No. It also, funnily enough, for me, I don't know if it's true for other people, but having a fantasy doesn't mean that you'll actually like doing it.
Yeah, it can turn out you're like, I thought that was going to be hot, but...
There are things that I still sometimes masturbate to, like, as a concept in my head, when I've tried them in real life, and I know I don't like them. But I don't know why, my brain thinks it's hot.
Yeah, the idea of it can be fun. I think a lot of complex, sort of unusual sex play, it all happens so much more smoothly in the mind. Especially like if you want to pee on someone, you get the stage fright. So you're just standing there, waiting. It's not the most erotic situation. But our time runs down.
Over?
Yeah.
How much we got?
So we've been talking for about an hour.
Okay.
So I really want people to send in questions, I think, because I think it would be really cool for us to be able to respond to particular points and issues and things and focus ourselves a bit more, because it's not like if we were on someone else's show, they'd just ask questions of our thoughts, which is easier than us just having a conversation about something that we both have talked about and we are both familiar with.
And we're just both way too woke. We need a straight man, That doesn't sound right in this context.
No.
A straight man is in the third party, kind of like, oh, I'm wondering about this.
I was wondering.
To ask questions. But
I do want to try and talk just a bit about the language situation, or the talking. I think that the antidote to so many of the issues that comes up in an open relationship, whether you're experimenting with the idea or you're actually getting into it, is talk. Talk about the stuff that you think is silly, and say, like, I know it's ridiculous and I'm not saying I actually have a problem, but I'm feeling this. And that has been maybe the best discovery for me, to like say to Jamie, like, I feel really weird about this idea, and I don't know why. And I'm not saying, therefore, that we can't or shouldn't do this, but I think I just need some time to sit with it. Or simply by saying it out loud, it loses its power. I was like, oh, actually, I think it's fine. I think it's fine if that happens. And to be able to make sure that as the other party in that situation, you just provide some space and don't think that because someone says, I feel weird about this, they're saying, you can't do this thing that you want to do. This is about like sharing the complexity, and there's plenty of it, about how you're feeling. So to do that effectively, it's really important not to use words like you always, or you never, or you made me.
Yep.
Because that just creates
bad language.
It's a combative situation then. The person didn't make you do anything. You predicted a reaction from them. You were probably fearful of rejection, or they said something which you didn't like and you didn't get into the situation at the time and talk about it. Nobody makes you do anything unless they're like actually chaining you to something, sexual or otherwise. It's something to talk about, not try and apportion blame, because no one's winning in a relationship unless you're both winning.
Yeah.
And to use words like you always and you never, I think we've got so trained into doing that.
It's
bad.
So wrong. And it's just bad language. Like, not just bad because it's bad, to say it, but it's uncreative and inaccurate.
Yeah.
No, they don't always tell you what to do. It's like no one ever does that. Like even the shittiest human being on earth wouldn't always tell you what to do. So be more accurate.
So a positive solution is to try and frame things like, when you do this or when you say this, I feel like this. So, for example, when you talk about all these guys you want to have sex with in the evening, when I feel like it's more our time, I feel like you're not appreciating us in that moment. I would really like to feel as though this is our intimate space, and it would be nice if we could talk about it at other times. Like, when you talk about like wanting to shag these other people, I sometimes feel like you don't appreciate me as much as you used to. Because I think if you're on the other side of that, it could be true. Maybe they don't, but that's good to find out. But it's probably like, oh, wow, you don't feel like I appreciate you? I'm not showing you that I appreciate you? Oh, that's awful. That's fucking awful. I'm so sorry that you feel that way. But it hasn't been framed as, you did this to me. It's like, this is a thing, and I'm feeling like this. Winning. It's winning at communication.
Yeah, it will be hard. Some people take longer to, for example, not be defensive even when the right language is used. Some people are so insecure that they automatically project someone telling them, even nicely, I feel like this, as an attack on them. And that requires, and my opinion is that when humans feel insecure, it shuts down, even in the most emotionally intelligent people, it shuts down that non-verbal understanding. So you have to be extraverbal. The reason why you have to talk things out, it's because their brain will be completely shut off to your body language or general demeanor. Like, you have to spell things out and be super open and obvious. It just requires it, I think.
And it's hardly the most enjoyable activity, I guess, but it's well worth it to be able to connect. And I feel like I'm more connected to Jamie than I would have guessed possible, or more than I have experienced with other people, in significant part because we face these challenges of insecurity and discovering what we want and what's going to work. And like I said, it's not simply smooth sailing, and it's important to be sensitive to the context. Like, if I'm feeling pretty low, I don't really want to know in the moment, that you're having an amazing orgy. Yeah, another like little small point is it's good in those agreements or rules to set out like, okay, so how is it talked about? Do you have to ask for permission? Personally, I'm not a big fan of permission. I think it's, for me, it works better to be that it's brought up and there's an assumption it will be okay, but there's also a space in which to say, I'm not comfortable about this, and discover why and find out. But at the same time, like, if he's or I am in a situation where, like, spontaneously you're at a party and someone's like, hey, well, you know, want to go upstairs, it's not necessary to be like, hey, this guy's just said that I want to go. No, like, impulsive moment, do it. And also an important thing is the second part of that I've had to learn, I'm getting better at, is the time to tell someone that something spontaneous happened is not necessarily right now. Where
as soon as you're able to.
No, it's not.
Right?
No, that's why I learned. It's not as soon as I'm able to. As soon as it seems to be the right moment, and I don't mean like don't talk about it for a week or something, but like I had an unexpected encounter, and I was like, blah blah blah, this has happened, blah blah blah, and Jamie wasn't really in a great place in himself at that time,
okay.
Which I sort of knew, but felt like I really had to tell him. And that wasn't an enjoyable situation for him. And I realized, okay, what I should have done is, like, got home, reconnect, find a moment where, you know, we're both feeling good, and be like, so, I wanted to wait to tell you this because it didn't seem like it was the best moment earlier. This happened. So it's not like conceal. It's more like, I don't know, if you were at a music concert or in a meeting, or your cat just died or some shit, now is not the time to go, I just fucked someone in the toilet, or, you know, whatever.
No, I mean, yes.
You know, it's the continuing sensitivity to where the other person is at. And it's delicate and contextual. There might not be a right answer, but I think there's less bad answers.
Yeah, I think I've made that mistake.
You have to know.
Yeah.
Right now.
That you're already mad and angry and upset about something else, but this is important. It has to be talked about.
I have to, for the sake of my own conscience, because really it is about you. You're like, I've got this information, I have to get it out of me. You know, not necessarily at that moment. And I know from the other side of the equation, where I knew that Jamie met up with someone, but I was in the middle of trying to do some pretty stressful work, and he was like going, okay, I'll tell you, you know, it's happened, and I'm like, okay, I'd like to hear about it later, I hope you had a great time. And then I was able to enjoy hearing about it, which turns out I do enjoy hearing about. Another cool thing to bring into the mix is I just throw everything into the blender. Something we try is, provided that the extra person is down with it, is to like take a sexy picture or a little video of the encounter to share with your partner. And I've definitely been less happy when the extra person has been like, I'm not comfortable with that. That's fine, you know. There's no that. It's not like an iron rule that they have to say yes. But I definitely feel more included and excited about the whole thing to have that sort of little access to what it is, and to celebrate, you know, the great time that I hope they both had. And for people, this hasn't become a thing for us quite yet, but it's also a cool thing that I've heard people talk about, that if there is a person, an extra person who's being seen like kind of regularly, I think it's really important to meet them, because otherwise they're just like Fabio in your head, like you're dating Arnold in his prime. And Aubrey Marcus said something really cool about this, which is, okay, let's break this down. I don't own your pleasure. And that's what it's like if you're in this monogamous thing, like your pleasure has to come from me, no one else. Maybe you can enjoy food, but that's it. I don't own your pleasure. This person is giving you pleasure. You're having fun. This person is giving pleasure and fun to the person that I love. You're kind of my ally in this situation. you guys are having fun, it's cool, and so if you're my ally, it'd be nice to know you and be like, okay, cool, you have your little thing. I'm sure there can be like hierarchy battles because, you know, assuming you've got a hot partner, someone like the extra person might be trying to work their way in a little bit, but that's another thing or threat or fear which is to be talked about and understood. And if that person seems to be getting out of line, better that you feel like you have an understanding of them and the situation rather than it's this incognito, scary figment of your imagination.
Yeah. Well, basically, so long as everything's talked about and kept open and communicated, the two of you are a team.
I think
working
so.
through it together. And so they'll never sort of feel like, oh, what's happening? Why is he trying to bust up this thing I'm doing with this other person? Because there's always this feeling of they're just, you know, sussing things out. Like, I tell them if I'm uncomfortable, they tell me. Like, it's not like a sudden weird thing when it comes up because it's been bubbling under the surface.
Yeah. And it's definitely cool to be like, I just need a minute. I loved hearing Aubrey Marcus say this, that like, it can be all very well if your partner's out banging and it's like, yeah, quite good experience, it was quite fun. But at some point, as you would hope, really, they're going to come back and go, it was amazing. Like, it was red hot sex. That's a new challenge, because then you're like, oh no, that feels more of a competition, or like he's got a 3-foot dick, I can't compete with that. But it's not a competition because it's not this direct comparison. You have your thing.
Yeah.
These are other things. What made me laugh was when he'd heard of this particularly good experience. He was like, I had to go down to a knee. Like, he just like dropped to the knee and was like, and I was like, I really respect him for sharing that. I haven't had such a visceral reaction, but the fact that he's invested enough to want to have this sort of relationship, even though as this guy who's been brought up so traditional and alpha in so many ways, he still has this residual strong reaction. It's okay to do that too. And it's okay, it's good for your partner to give you a little timeout where you're like, I just need a minute. How many dicks? I need a, because you have to process.
Subtitle of this episode, how many dicks?
How many dicks?
All of them.
All of
Are we
them.
running out of time?
I think we're probably out of the life of our, or the space of our current recording equipment, which at least helps us stay reasonably
Cool. Well, I have more
concise.
stuff to talk about. We'll leave it for next time.
So people write to us. You can email us, hello@voicesinthedark.world, messages on Instagram @vinthed.pod, facebook.com/vinthed, all that kind of thing. What are your thoughts? Were you triggered? And if so, have you thought about why? And if you haven't thought about why, please think about why before throwing flaming torches. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like we may have been a bit scattered there, but I can never tell when I'm doing it.
Some topics are so broad, like in the scope, you know? At least I feel like it's doing them a disservice to reduce them to sound bites and like, oh, it's important to do this, this, and this. And
this,
like,
this, and this. Yeah. Well, let us know. And for a more structured or specific set of responses, please send in those questions. So thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, how many dicks? And please be silly, be kind, and be weird.